I thought about just telling. I thought about just doing the whole show as if you were Brad.
No one wants to pretend to be Brad. Even Brad doesn't want to be Brad.
And seeing how maybe that would get us some movieism fan mail. What happened to Brad? He sounds normal all of a sudden.
Well, you'd realize that Brad's the true star of your podcast. Sadly.
We miss Brad. We don't like this. It's like new Coke. It's like new Coke.
Like picketers in front of your house with signs. Bring
it's
back
like,
Brad.
It's like when they switched the Coke formula to new Coke, and everybody's like, no. The new Coke sucks. Bring back classic Coke. Bring back.
We don't want classic Brad. We don't like classic this new Brad.
This nouveau Brad thing. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Movieisms. I'm Becca Meyer, and today I have with me the
I like that you have no introduction prepared for me. You're like some guy. I just have some guy on the show.
How am I going to introduce you? This is Rob, who I met from the internet. So it sounds creepier than it is, but my friend Rob, because Brad or Balding Ewok had a family emergency late in the week and was unable. He's not even here to record. So I feel bad for Brad, but I'm also getting a vacation from Brad, so I don't know how to feel. It's hard to put it into words how I feel. But it's elation. But this is Rob Gokee. He is a podcaster, and currently writing and directing his own thing, and a composer.
And yes, that's my day job.
Yeah. Probably most famous for composing the music for Becca Meyer films.
That's true, yes. That's actually, when I send people demos, it's just your films.
Right, because I
have you worked with any of the directors? Does it really matter?
Is it because my directing brings out the best in you?
Can we see this Gush movie? Oh, no. I don't know that that's a good example of my... It's an angry film. I like Gush. I'm making fun of only the fact that it's so violent.
Yeah, I liked it too. Yeah. Well, of course I made it, but of course I'm going to like it. But yeah. Anyway, so Rob Gokee, who is a creative person and also a podcaster. He's got as many podcasts as I do. And I think we're trying to compete with each other. Like, if you come up with another one, I'm going to have to come up with another one. So we also have 3.
So you need to be working on your fiction podcast, because I'm 4 scripts in. 3.
Yeah. Well, I have an idea for podcast about every 2 weeks, so I'll just pick one of those.
I know, yes. You need a meditation podcast.
In fact, I do. I'm starting a meditation channel on YouTube, so yeah, there you go.
Look, I just gave you a plug, just like that. We just worked it in. That's more than Brad's done for you in how many episodes?
So Rob is, like, at this point we're old friends. Right. And when I ended up needing a co-host, he said he would jump in because he'd never been on this particular show, and we have things to talk about because we're sort of polar opposites in terms of our tastes.
Yeah, that's true in a lot of ways when it comes to creative things.
Yeah,
but for some reason it works.
Yeah, well, opposites attract, baby. but I am like a hardcore movie lover. I like the indie stuff, the weird stuff, the little offbeat stuff, the David Lynch things, the stuff that makes you think. And then when it comes to movies, you're just I just want to see things blow up.
It's funny because most people get into this industry because they want to do movies. And I got into this industry because of television. It was a television composer that made me want to be a composer. So that's always been my first love. And really, that's been my ultimate goal. It's not an Oscar, it's an Emmy, or it's being on a series. Not that I have any problem with movies, but it is different in that a lot of people, maybe it's a little different now in 2019 because of Netflix and how many different TV shows are being made. But it used to be, especially if you were a composer, even like 10 years ago, you would do TV as a stepping stone on the way to film.
Yeah.
And now there's so much crossover that it doesn't work that, which I love. It doesn't work that way anymore. Yeah. Film composers are doing television, and some composers, you do television and you stay there. You're happy with it.
Yeah. There's definitely been a renaissance. I don't know if that's the correct term. There's we are in the golden age of content. Like, there is something for everything. If you're into this, you can go watch a show about that. And because of the nature of all of that, television has become, in my opinion, my snobby opinion, much more watchable in the last 10 years. Like, people like you were saying, like Netflix and HBO and Amazon have been stepping up with some real good shows. And AMC is, I used to only watch shows on AMC or HBO. But now there's like Amazon, they produce some decent content.
Right. And Netflix has some great things. And even Hulu has some shows that are pretty good. I mean, The Handmaid's Tale is amazing.
Right. I think I've seen one episode of it and liked it, but never continued watching it. I haven't watched it yet.
That's my favorite show currently on TV right now.
Yeah, it's your Breaking Bad.
Yes, it is. It is the first thing since Breaking Bad that I've loved that much.
Yeah. My current Breaking Bad is Mr. Robot. And surprisingly,
I like Mr. Robot. Sometimes it's almost too weird. There are times where it's so out there that I'm not sure how I feel, but I do like the show, and I'm a season behind.
Yeah, well, that's what the weirdness, the fact that it's weird gets me, but also that it's weird and it's right there in the middle of like one of the shittiest stock channel cable channels out there. It's like
that's true.
Right there on USA, and it's like the weirdest shit on cable television, and it's on USA.
I remember when I first heard about that show, and I was like, "What network is it on?" And someone was like, "USA," and I was like, "No, really." They're like, "No, is it in reruns? Why is it on USA?" And they're like, "No. Everybody has original." It's like you're saying, everybody has original content now. Yeah. I mean, even channels that I feel like every channel does that now, and it's smart for them. They're looking around and they're seeing that you make more money off original content. You're not paying a licensing fee to somebody else, so it makes sense to do that. And
if you get a hit, like with a Mr. Robot or anything really. But
even AMC used to just be the movie channel or the rerun movie channel, and then it just. I don't know if Breaking Bad was the moment when it exploded, but now it's this source for original content that's up there with everybody else.
Was Breaking Bad before Mad Men, or was Mad Men before Breaking Bad?
That's a.
I think it was Mad Men.
You think Mad Men was first?
I might totally be wrong.
But Breaking Bad's first season was the writer's strike season because it was short compared to. It was only 7 episodes instead of like 12 or 13 because of the writer's strike. I don't know that Mad Men was around yet then.
But I keep thinking it ran longer than Breaking Bad. So
they spread it out. They did that thing that they started doing where they split the seasons in half, like they do with The Walking Dead, which is kind of annoying. And I think they started doing that with Mad Men much earlier than they did with Breaking Bad. They did it just in the last season, I think.
Yeah. So I like shows like that, like Breaking Bad, Mad Men. But my problem with TV shows is really I would like Breaking Bad. Breaking Bad was 5 seasons. It got in, it got out, it told a great story, and it quit while it was ahead. Shows like Game of Thrones, which I do watch, But it has, in my mind, my impatient television watching mind has overstayed its welcome by about 2 seasons already. And now we're about to go into another season where every episode is 90 minutes long. And I'm like, what are they going to do for 90 minutes? Talk to each other about the battle that's going to come up in the middle of the season?
Yeah. That has never been my favorite show. I watch it too. I like it. I don't love it. It's not a show I would rewatch. I want to see how it ends, but I want it to end. I'm like you, and then I'm like, okay, let's get through this final season.
Yeah, but it's only going to be, what is it, 6 episodes?
Yeah, but 690. It's like 6 feature films.
Yeah,
6 90-minute episodes.
I mean, what an embarrassment of riches that HBO. It's like, I think, aren't they spending like $15 million an episode?
Yeah, I mean, the amount of subscribers they're probably bringing in because of it. There are people who will resubscribe to HBO just for Game of Thrones.
Yeah, it's crazy, not ridiculous, but because I get it that they're doing that. Because actually, if you think about it, HBO has a lot of like fractured content. They do things that they only have like a handful of like solid hits.
Right.
Everything else is like weird stuff that's like not genre, but it's more niche for niche audiences. There's a show on there about weed. I can't think of High Maintenance. I have never watched it because
I was going to say weeds.
I never.
No, I know High Maintenance.
I don't find weed culture entertaining in any way. I hate the smell of it, so I'm just kind of like an old man when it comes to that stuff.
No, I agree with you. I thought Weeds was a good show for like 2 seasons, and then I felt like I was sticking with it just to see it through. But I don't really care about weed culture either. I don't have an opinion on it either way. If people want to smoke weed, great, go smoke weed. But I just don't give a shit about it, and I don't want to watch a show or see a movie that's based around growing weed because it doesn't interest me either. So look, we have something in common.
Right, finally, and it's
our taste for weed.
Just taste for weed. We just sound like old white guys now. Just sound like old people.
We just lost all your stoner audience.
But but they had that
the smell, but I just don't really want. It doesn't do anything for me. That's the thing. I've gotten high, and I just don't. I don't like the feeling of being that mellow. I don't like to be slowed down. I used to play guitar with a friend who would smoke and said, "Oh, it makes us so much creative." And I'm like, "Dude, my fingers are slow. Now I can't play as fast. This is not helpful." I'm like, I'll just drink. I'll drink while you get stoned. Whatever.
No, but okay, so television. So what is it you think that is about television that you... But for me, when I watch television, I get real like impatient real quick with TV shows because I don't like getting sucked into a TV show that I know is bad. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like what I call stagey. I can feel that they were in a rush because in TV they'll shoot like 11 pages a day. You know, on a movie you're lucky if you shoot 3, 4, 5 pages in a day, and you can feel that when you're watching the movie. Like they will spend 60 days shooting a 2-hour movie. Not all movies are made that quickly, but they'll spend 30 to 60 days shooting a movie, but they'll shoot an episode of television in like 11 days. And you can feel it sometimes in like the way it's staged because it's
that's the movie snob in you.
Well, that is the movie snob. That's what I'm saying. It's like, so when I'm watching a TV show, I can feel it. I've always been able to feel it, even when I was like younger and not really like knowing what was going on. There were just certain shows that I just couldn't watch because it bugged me the way they shot it.
I mean, there are tons of TV shows I love the way they're shot. It's one of the things I look at. But it's really the writing for me. Yeah, and I don't give a shit about the whole like long cinematic, like, oh, look at how long they took them to do this shot, and it's a beautiful shot. Well, yeah, it's beautiful, but if it wasn't there, I wouldn't give a shit.
Right. So Roma.
Yes. Yeah,
Every shot in that movie is a long shot.
Like I love that. I love the story of that, but I don't like, and it's beautifully shot, but none of that, if it wasn't there, it wouldn't detract from the movie. I wouldn't think, oh, they rushed through this scene. Oh, look, he parked the car in 5 seconds instead of like in and out. Right. And I understand why, like, that sequence was important, because later when the wife is pissed off and just like rams the car into the side of the garage, it has more impact. But yeah, that whole cinematic thing doesn't do it. It's not the same for me. So I understand where you're coming from, but like Handmaid's Tale is shot. It's amazingly shot, and the production design and the lighting and the color are great. But so it's the writing, it's the serialized nature of TV. I like that you can tell a story over 12 episodes or 15 episodes instead of trying to confine it into 90 minutes or 2 hours.
Yeah, I do like the serialized nature of television. Like Breaking Bad or Mad Men, those shows were not the first shows, but those are the first shows that I realized that 10 to 12 episode formula had crept over into other people's vernacular. You know, like it used to just be an HBO thing. And like it crept over into AMC and Netflix, and then people started thinking, oh, we can make shows much more addictive if we tell one story over fewer episodes instead of 24 stories over 24 different episodes with maybe one or two to be continueds in there. Where everything's
and filler episodes, not
filler.
I mean, like where you're like 12 of these episodes will be part of the story arc for the season, and the other 12 will be one-off episodes that you could just jump in and out of, which networks like, but I don't know that creatives like that.
Right. Well, networks I think like it because they can, for the very reason that a lot of us haven't seen certain shows, is because of like, oh, I need to start from the beginning, and if like Lost. The way Lost was, even because
you could never jump into that show.
You could never jump into it because even when they were doing like 20 or 24 episodes a season, they were telling a continuous story for the most part, and you were lost if you started Lost in the middle of Lost.
If you think about it too, back when Lost was on, if you let's say season 3 was airing on the network, you would have to go out and buy the DVDs. Or I guess rent them from Netflix. It was not an easy way. Binging was not easy. You're like, oh, I want to watch this show, but in order to watch the show, I have to procure seasons 1 and seasons 2 somehow, or rent them and watch them. Now it's so easy to go back and binge something if you're behind, because God, even if you're watching like a CW show, the second the season is over, the seasons are up on Netflix. So if you're behind up through a current season, you can just go find them and watch them, or you could buy something on iTunes immediately after it airs.
Really? So like they show up like I thought what happens with shows, most shows, is it's like I thought I noticed that like right before the next season starts as when the old seasons come out on Netflix. So you're like, now you're still kind of like behind a little bit.
No, the CW must have some kind of deal, because now what happens is the second like the season of Flash is over, that whole season is up on Netflix. So you could catch up and binge during the summer or before the next season comes out.
Well, that's smart. That's smart, because if you do miss an episode of something, I don't know why people miss episodes if they have a DVR, but
but people don't have DVRs. Like I haven't had cable in almost 10 years, so I haven't had a DVR. And more people are unplugging, and more millennials aren't ever getting cable. So the DVR is becoming like the VCR.
Yeah. Okay. So television is better, but I still feel like everybody feels like they need to have a show, and like they need to have a series. And I think what happens is people's standards for what is addictive or binge-worthy have seriously dropped, or I don't know. Maybe these are people that were just fine with every iteration of CSI that was on television anyway. So,
well, and those were all out before that happened anyway. So those people were watching. I mean, being in California, I feel like I'm in this weird bubble where I think I forget that most of the country, like nobody I know watches CSI. And I'll think, well, who's watching CSI? Like, it's clearly doing well. It's because the whole middle part of the country are watching network TV. Yeah. And a lot of the middle part of the country have cable still. And
our parents. Our parents.
And so that kind of traditional TV, you know, I can't remember. I don't watch the news. Like, I'll look at news on Twitter, or if I really want to, like, I'll look through Apple News. But I haven't watched local news. And the only time that happens is when I go to my parents and I remember why I don't watch local news.
Yeah, dude, I used to. First of all, you know what killed me for watching local news is working for it. I worked at a local news channel, doing like local programming, and I just spent time. Not the people, because those guys, they're the people. Those people are they're doing a job. They love their job. They want to be journalists and all that stuff. So it's not that. It's the sensationalizing, the titillating that they do just to get people to watch at 5 and then to watch again at 5:30. And
no, exactly. They Horrible don't fire, people dead, news 11. You're like,
and they don't even talk about news. It's the 24-hour news cycle is what it is.
Right.
And you know, CNN is guilty of it. CNN's bad about it, actually. But that's why I don't watch the news either. I will listen to NPR, which I love. I listen to NPR every day. And then I will watch, I'll go to Apple News, like you said, and I'll decide which story I want to read or watch.
Right.
Even if I'm on CNN, I'll click on stuff that interests me. Like, instead of watching the clickbait shit that the other channels that they come up with. Anyway, so you I was
going to say, you love the theater experience of going to the movies. You like going to the movies, sitting in the theater. I would never go to a theater to watch a movie if I didn't have to, again, for the rest of my life. I'd be happy watching them at home. I don't care necessarily about seeing it on a big screen anymore.
That's because you have bad taste. Dude, if I lived out there, or God forbid for some fated reason you lived out here, I would get you to a movie theater. I'd make you go just because I want to hear you complain about going to the theater.
No, because half the time I go, no, I don't want to see that movie. No, I don't want to see that in the theater either.
we could sneak tacos in. We could sit there and like pull one over. I do. I don't know where my love of going to the theater came from. I think when I started like actively going to the movies on my own, I was like a sophomore or junior in high school. I got my driver's license, and that's what we did on Friday nights. We went to the movies. But I was, even then, before I was a filmmaker, I was a musician back then. I was a high school student, but I was a musician back then. Like, that's what I cared most about. But movies, just always, I just loved them. Something ritualistic about going to the theater. But the ritual of going to the theater didn't start until I was in college. Like where it started to become like a part of like how I got away from things. Like, it's like church. When we started Movieisms, that was how I described it to Brad, as like, it's like church but for movies.
Yeah, I remember that's how you pitched it to me when you first had the idea for it.
And there's something about I will get there early enough so I can get the seat that I want. Nowadays they have prearranged seating or assigned seating, and like that annoys me because I don't always get to sit right where I want to sit. But you do. I get there early. I get my seat. I sit and watch the trailers that I've seen 15 million times already, and they drive me crazy. I saw a movie last night, and every trailer was a trailer that I've already seen 10 times, and I'm like, why do I do this to myself? Why am I making myself watch these shit? And it makes me not want to see the movies. It's like, I don't want to see this movie because I've seen the trailer a million times, and I know exactly what the movie is going to be because they give the whole.
Well, that's the worst part is when there's a trailer that gives the entire movie away, and I'm like, why? Why did you just give me the whole plot of the movie? Why? Look, it's a happy family, and then like the father dies, and then the family has to move on without the father. Maybe you just could not give that part away until I watched your movie.
They're afraid people aren't gonna they're afraid people are going to go to it and not know what it is if they haven't already been forced spoon-fed thing. But the thing is,
Right.
audiences. Okay, so there's a general audience. Like the general audience, isn't gonna go see like The Favorite. You know, you were talking about
Right.
The Favorite a few minutes
Yeah.
ago because it's weird. It's a little offbeat, but and
Well, and you have to like period. Like I love Downton Abbey. It's not in my top 10. It's in my top 20 favorite shows. It's a great show. It's also very dark, and they love killing characters off. But I also watch The Crown and Victoria. So you have to like period pieces in order to go see The Favorite, and that's a niche audience. Not everybody wants to go watch a movie about England in the 18th century.
right. So that's cornered itself right there, and it. So a mass audience isn't going to go see The Favorite, but it's when you watch the trailer for The Favorite, it doesn't give everything away. In fact, it did. I remember when I saw the movie, I'm like, the movie wasn't as funny as the trailer made it seem it was going to be. So it was the studio or distribution company or whoever it is that was cutting their trailer, the marketing wheel of that was a little like, let's make it seem like a comedy, you know, and it was funny.
I'm glad I didn't see the trailer because I definitely would not have wanted to watch it if I thought it was going to be comedic because I don't like comedies.
Yeah, because you're... Well, it didn't make it seem like it was like the new Seth Rogen film or anything.
But it's wacky in that Royal Tenenbaums kind of way, but almost.
Right.
Which is actually a movie I don't like necessarily. This one, The Favorite's not as out there, but it's funny in a way that I'm not expecting it to be because I think I've watched so many serious period dramas that I come into it and my brain's already thinking serious, and then weird... Yeah. Wacky things happen and it throws me off.
Yeah. Like the stuff with the mud.
Right.
Yeah. Well, so a mass audience isn't going to go see that, but I do like it, and but they're so worried, and it's a movie like The Favorite is such a small movie in the first place. And I don't mean small, like I mean budgetarily. It didn't have it was not like the new Fast and the Furious movie that's got like $80 million thrown at it or something like that.
Yeah, I go to a theater to see that.
I've
never seen one of those in a theater, but I watch them at home.
I saw the first Fast and the Furious movie 40 fucking years ago when it came out, whatever that is.
Yeah.
and they just started to churn them out. And last night I wanted to talk to you. This is a perfect time to talk to you about this because there's a new movie coming out that has is not Vin Diesel. Yes, it says
with The Rock and Jason Statham. Yeah,
it says Fast and Furious presents. And who's Fast and Furious? Normally it's like David Lynch, Steven Spielberg presents, or Paramount Pictures presents, but it's Fast and Furious. Like a fictitious franchise is presenting what is it called?
Hobbs and Shaw. Is
that the name of their characters?
Yeah, it is the name of the characters. And I follow The Rock on Instagram, so I know that he's been shooting it. I also know that he literally has his gym moved from country to country when he's shooting, which you can do if you're The Rock. But it's a little crazy that he's like, all this stuff in this room, it's going to go to a new room in like on this continent. So like, get it all on the plane.
So I actually really like The Rock. In fact, when we get done here, I'm going to follow The Rock. I like him. I think he's entertaining. I think he's funny. I think that he is a perfect mixture of knowing what he does well and doing that. I just can't watch a Fast and Furious movie. I've tried. I haven't really tried. I've only seen the first one, but the trailers just seem so like this is like I know it's going to be a movie I don't want to see, and at this point I've already missed like 9 of them. So I'm like I can't decide now to go see Fast and Furious. I have to watch the rest of them. And Brad will say things like, "Well, the third one's really good, and then there's this." And I'm like, "Good compared to what? Good compared to Fast and Furious movies, or good compared to like Goodfellas? Like, what's the scale we are grading on?" And I personally don't give a shit about explosions if I don't give a shit about what's going on with the story or the characters or anything like. So they blew some shit up. That's actually not that hard to do. You put it in the computer and you push the explosion button and it explodes. It's hard.
Unless they're doing it practical, but yes,
it's harder than that. And does the Fast and Furious do practical effects? They do
that's
a lot.
A good question. Like when they were dragging a safe behind a vehicle, and like, here's the thing, I haven't seen all of them either. 3 was the first one I saw, and the reason that I became aware of the franchise, it's the first score I ever heard by Brian Tyler, who's my favorite film composer, and he was, from that moment, I remember specifically that I was in my apartment in Long Beach, California, and I was cleaning, and I had headphones in, and while I was cleaning, that score came up in like random play. I think I owned a copy of the score and hadn't listened to it. And I remember stopping what I was doing and thinking, like, what is this that I'm listening to? And I went back to find it. And then I went back and found everything from him. But his Fast and Furious scores have always been my favorite score. So every time there's another movie coming out, I know that, you know, I'm anticipating a new score from him. Yeah. And so that's why I watched 3. That's why I watched 4, and that's why I watched 5. And I think, and I've seen 2, but I actually haven't seen 1, and I think I'm behind like 1 or 2 of the newer ones. But I own every single score for them because I'm a musician first. So it's all I was going to say that's why the in the theater experience isn't as important to me, because filmmaking is so much more visual for you. Like, I'm okay watching it on home on my large TV, but I'll listen to the score, you know, in that good headphones like all day long, because it's always music first. At least like that's where my first love is. Whereas yours is filmmaking, and so you want to see and can appreciate the long shot or the shot that took 14 takes to get right. I care less about that. I just want to see the finished product when it comes to that. I want to hear the words, the script. I feel like for me, it's music first, writing second, cinematography third, and then acting is somewhere down there.
Yeah, clearly.
Like, the words are great, but it's acted poorly. I guess that has an effect. And directing. I mean, directing's important. Whenever I always try and dissect whenever I'm not liking something. I'm like, so is it the actor, is it the writing, or is it the directing? Because you can't tell necessarily if someone's not directed well unless you see them in something else. And you're like, oh, they're brilliant in this, but they were really bad in that. So maybe it's the director.
So what you're saying is the reason you can watch all that bad television is because you put acting fourth on your list of priorities.
What you claim is bad television.
It's not like, and I'd say it's not.
I would consider, well, here's the thing. I don't know that I wouldn't call anything bad, but like, I don't watch any sitcoms. In the past, I have seen sitcoms. Like, I've watched every episode of Cheers and every episode of Friends, of
Seinfeld? Have you seen Seinfeld?
I have, but I don't like Seinfeld. But I have seen every episode of Seinfeld once. I don't know that I'll ever watch that show again, but I've seen like every episode of Growing Pains, and like a lot of the late 80s comedies, probably because they were rerunning the hell out of them at the time. You know, you get home and it'd be on for like, here's 2 episodes back to back every night for 5 days a week. And so eventually you work your way through all of them out of order, often. But
worked for Fox, worked for Firefly.
But I don't enjoy. I don't watch. I don't ever turn TV on just to have a TV on. Like, if it's on, it's because I want to watch it. I don't. It's never background noise. If I'm going to have background noise, it's going to be music. So sitcoms to me are often like background noise. Like, this is what I'd watch if I want to fall asleep to it. Like, no, I'll just read. I don't want to put something on that I don't want to pay attention to.
So if Brian Tyler is why you watch Fast and Furious movies. Why do you watch Transformers movies?
Because I was a Transformers kid. Because I loved the cartoon. And I'm not saying that Transformers movies aren't flawed. I always
they're beyond flawed.
They're like porn. I always equate them to porn. I'm like, look, you have the like flimsy plot that gets you with the humans that gets you to the like robots fighting, which is the porn part, and then you have to go back and listen to the people whine about something, and then you can go back to more robots fighting. So I'm like, okay, humans, I don't really care if you get squished or whatever. Like, you do what you're gonna do. I just want to see Optimus and Megatron fight in the middle of the street and destroy the city.
Doesn't it bother you how overly majestic they make Optimus Prime sound in the movies?
But he's always been that. I mean, I've watched almost every Transformers cartoon that there is, and that's Optimus. I mean, I guess you get used to how. That's a good description of him, but that's exactly how he is. He was before Michael Bay got him.
Got a hold of. I watched Transformers when I was a kid. I was like, we're what you're older than me, but not. But not
here's
by
the thing:
much.
I didn't really enjoy the original. Like, God, what was it when it first came out? The 80s? I guess it was 80s. The original
80s,
Transformers.
Yeah, 80s, yeah. When we were kids.
When my son was younger. Beast Wars came out, which was like, because there's a lot of iterations of Transformers because Hasbro's smart, and every time they create a new Transformers series, they can create new toys. And so Nick was into Beast Wars, and I would watch with him, and that was my reintroduction to Transformers. And then they did Transformers Prime, which had really good animation and was scored by Brian Tyler. And Transformers Prime is probably the best 3 seasons of Transformers, in my opinion, because the stories are good. They're very dark. There's like torture, and there's robots getting killed off. That's what I loved about Beast Wars is they were killing them off. So I was like, oh, this is a very adult cartoon because we're having characters die, and you don't get that in you can't watch Animaniacs. They're not going to kill off one of them. Or SpongeBob. SpongeBob's not going to die in an episode.
Yeah. Well, but for me, Optimus Prime just had a deep voice when I was a kid. I remember him having a deep voice. Mm-hmm. But in the
it's that same voice actor still does Optimus Prime.
Okay, I wondered about that.
Yeah,
but when
Peter
I watched the Michael Bay, even Bumblebee, which I saw, I haven't gone to see. I've seen like 2 Transformers movies, and then I saw the one where they fought the Dinobots. Mm-hmm. And then I saw Bumblebee when it came out around Christmas time, which was actually
I have not seen it yet. I have a copy of it. I haven't watched it.
It was not great, but it was not as bad as a Michael Bay directed Transformers movie. So, in my opinion, and I'm admittedly a snob about the Transformers movies. Not even just Transformers movies, but the Fast and the Furious. Those never-ending franchises, but. Optimus Prime just like, Bumblebee, do this and go do that. It's like, who talks like that? Nobody talks like that. I realize we're watching a movie about transforming robots from another dimension or another planet. But what's the name of their planet?
Cybertron.
Right. That's why. Well, that's not that. We're talking about robots from a planet called Cybertron. So I realize that there's some suspension of disbelief, but emotionally, I want to connect with Optimus Prime because Optimus Prime is like the hero, like leader. He's like the James Earl Jones here. But it's so self-aware of how. Big and powerful it is, as opposed to just being, like Lawrence Fishburne in The Matrix, where he has a couple moments where he's like, free your mind, but he's really just like leading people through the thing. He's not like, I don't picture Lawrence Fishburne doing a Superman pose while he's talking. Optimus Prime, I picture him doing the Superman pose while he's going, Bumblebee,
I mean, it's the little kid design part of what Transformers was originally supposed to be, which was to get kids to buy. Hasbro was like, create these characters that we can make toys for, that we can get kids to buy them. And so they did make him way over the top. But then because he had so much appeal, I feel like they couldn't change him. They're like, well, we still have to keep Optimus Prime like Optimus Prime. We can't suddenly have him sound like like Lawrence Fishburne.
Right.
Or yeah, exactly.
So we haven't talked about your other stuff because I feel like we should talk about that too, just for a few minutes before we go. Did you start? Here's where you can be honest with me, for the first time ever.
Go ahead.
Did you start Taco City, the podcast, so you could get free tacos?
No, I did not. It just happens to work out that way sometimes.
Because I think I would have started Taco City, the podcast, to get free tacos.
You know what, though? In the beginning, it didn't work that way. I mean, I don't know that. And if I went through all 70 places or whatever that I've done, I feel like the majority of them, I still had to pay for the tacos.
Yeah.
I mean, I started it because, well, I had the book Taco City, which was just based around LA, and someone approached me that works for a company that does advertising for podcasts, who was a friend of mine in the industry and had switched to that job, said, you should make it a podcast. And then I laughed at him because I didn't listen to podcasts. I was like, dude, I don't know how to make a podcast. I don't even listen to podcasts.
You were so anti-podcasting at one point in time. Not anti.
Well, at that point, you were like, hey, I do listen to this podcast. I'm like, yeah, whatever, dude. Like, I listen to music. I don't know. And then my wife started listening to Alison Venor, who's a producer, started listening to a lot of podcasts, true crime podcasts. And then we took a road trip across the United States because she had a gig. She was shooting something in Pennsylvania and we live in LA. So we drove and we took our time and camped, but we listened to just podcasts the entire road trip there, 9 days, and the entire trip home, which was about 9 days. And when I came back, 18 days of podcast listening, I knew the kind of podcast I wanted to make. I thought, okay, now I have a handle on this. I want to be able to tell stories. I want to be a storyteller with podcasts. I feel like I can pull from my film and TV experience and do it that way. And so then I thought this would be a cool way to tell people stories who have restaurants, who are chefs, who have some kind of struggle, especially because it's tacos and Mexican food, people who, came across the border and had a cart, and then the cart turned into, it was a stand that turned into a cart that turned into a truck that became a brick and mortar. So the success stories are always different and really cool, because everybody's got a different story to tell. And that's more important than the tacos themselves. Yeah.
You're like in the promised land of tacos out there.
Yes, that's true. It is very. I mean, if I lived in the Midwest, the seasons, Taco City would be like 10 episodes and then out. Be like, and I'm done, guys. But I interview a lot of places by phone. I had to expand and cover, because if it's just LA, not everyone wants to listen to just stories about places in LA. So, I've done Alaska. We did Black Rooster in Florida. We need to do Tacos Norteño, which is your favorite place, one of these days. But and so it's not. There are places that I've interviewed that I haven't actually eaten the food ever, because I just haven't had a chance to go by there yet.
Yeah, well, I was just thinking, doing a story on every, like, if you were just LA, not everybody's interesting enough to put on a 30 or 45-minute podcast.
I've run into that problem far less than I expected. I can think of, like I said, 70 episodes maybe, because I don't keep track of them by count. I probably 2 or 3 where I personally thought this was not an interesting story to tell.
We do it,
but I have an episode coming out Tuesday, and I've already interviewed him, so fuck it. I guess I got to make it work. But like 2 or 3 out of 70. And so I've been surprised, because I expect some people like to talk, some people don't like to talk. And so it is harder when you ask somebody a question and you get like a 3-sentence answer, because then you're struggling to get them to open up a little bit, and some people just aren't big talkers.
Yeah, because we do the other show we do is Film Reverie. We don't talk about it too much on Movieisms. We don't talk about
you have another podcast.
Yeah, we don't talk about Movieisms very much on Film Reverie, but they come up every now and then. So the thing we do a lot of interviews on Film Reverie too, where we talk to other filmmakers or creative people, and you're right, it does happen a lot less because it happens a lot less than you think it would, but every now and then you get somebody on for an interview, and I just assume, I guess, that people are going to talk as much as I do, which is a lot. I talk a lot. Like, I can't, you and I have a thing where we can't get on the phone because it's like, well, I don't have 2 hours to talk to you today. And there's no way we're going to have a 15-minute phone call. So, but yeah, it's like pulling teeth out of, it's like pulling teeth to get people to answer. And it's like, you're on a show where we're trying to present you as a person worth paying attention to, and you don't have answers to the questions, and we don't really do it's not like we're intimidating, because we really just want to have conversations with people. Do you go in with a list of questions, or do you just try to talk with them? And because your episodes are very conversational, but I don't know what you're editing out, really.
No, it's a good question. First of all, I'm not editing out hardly anything. Really, the only thing that gets edited is if, like, I'm recording, because your stuff is often someone's at home and you're at home and you're recording and the environment is very closed. Often I'm standing on the side of the road next to the person's taco truck or in the restaurant. So if there's a weird noise and we have to redo a line, I'll edit that. Or if they say something and they're like, I don't want that, that's not public, then I'll cut it out. But even that's very rare. So the episodes are 98% the way that I recorded them.
Yeah. Okay.
I have a list of questions. Obviously in the beginning I needed the questions in front of me because I wasn't used to interviewing people. What I do now is I feel like I need to change it up maybe the next season when we come back around after summer. My first question is food memory. I ask people about their earliest food memory, and that will often spark the entire rest of the conversation. And I never have to look at the list anymore. I also have done it enough times that I know it in my head. So when we're getting towards the end of an answer or towards the end of the interview, I know what questions haven't been answered. And a lot of it is basic, what's the best thing about running a restaurant? What's the worst thing about doing this? Where did your name come from? When they don't live in LA, I ask them about ingredients, because outside of LA, it's hard to find things like cilantro and tomatillos in bulk. But I try and make it as organic as possible. And the best ones are the ones where they'll just talk and we're having a conversation. And after about 30 minutes, I realized they just answered every single question I was going to ask.
Yeah.
Without me asking it.
It's best when it can come out organically, because it does intimidate people when you show up with a list of 20 questions and you ask one question, then the next question, and somebody's not used to being interviewed. Right. Or like they're not used to having a microphone put in their face and, okay, be interesting. It's like, what? But that's one of the things that I feel like we've gotten better at over time, is realizing that people just need to be put at ease a little bit when you're talking to them. And so we make them laugh, and that's honestly where some of the picking on Brad stuff came from. It was like us trying to put people at ease and making jokes and say, hey, we're not so serious. You can be yourself here and relax and blah blah blah.
I always tell people it's not live, because I think often because podcasting, even though it's not a new thing and it's been around for a long time, it's still new to a lot of people. It's like when we tried to explain Twitter to people 9-10 years ago, and no one understood it. I have to tell people, like, this is what a podcast is, and here's how you listen. And so I immediately say it's not live, and if you mess up, we just start over, and I can edit it out, and you can see the stress, like, in their shoulders kind of relax if I'm with them in person most of the time, because then they realize, like, okay, I can just kind of be myself. I don't have to worry about saying something dumb, and I'm like, this is about you. This is not this isn't some hard hitting expose on Inside Edition or TMZ. Like, I want to be able to tell your story. So obviously, I'm not going to do anything that's going to make you look bad. I'm not trying to incite controversy.
Yeah, you're not going to walk in and critique their tacos. You're trying to tell their story, which is probably helps a lot too, and so that it's like this is like a good thing, not a stressful thing.
The thing that happens more often, that's more frustrating than people who have a boring story, is when you ask somebody if they want to be on the show, at least for my show, and they'll say, well, how many followers do you have on your account? And we'll have to talk to our PR department. Part of me is like, fuck you. I want to give you free advertising. I just want to talk to you about food for 30 minutes. It's not like and often that happens with bigger places. If I try and go after some place, sometimes it's places that just have 2 or 3 locations. And they're like, oh, you'll have to talk to our PR management company that runs and see if this is good for us. And I kind of, at that point, I'm like, I don't even want to do you anymore. Like, forget it. I'll go talk to the guy on the street with a card table set up and a grill. He's going to be more interesting than like getting corporate speak.
Yeah.
Which is why I'll never have Taco Bell on my show. Well, that's because I'd never be able to get them. I'd have to go through their PR department. It's just,
plus,
I'd love to talk to Roy Choi from Kogi because he's the father of food trucks. Yeah. But getting to him is so much harder than getting to like the guy around the corner that just opened up, like going to Taco Loco. Right.
And that guy is never going to get any attention like what you're giving him. You know what I mean? He's not gonna, well, not ever, but like at that point, we just said, like you said, a card table and a grill. That guy doesn't have like, whatever the big publication is out there, like banging on his door to talk to him.
No, exactly. There's a place, LA is broken up into like the west side and the east side of town. And, the west side is a little bit more like where Santa Monica and Culver City and like that part of LA is. It's a little bit more corporate and less like east side of LA and East LA. There's a lot more mom and pop places or little places that are just opened up in a shop by a family. And I interviewed, and I'm not sure when this episode will air, so it may actually go up because it's coming up soon. I interviewed a place called Gracias Senor, and when I went out there to see the guy, and he was in Pacific Palisades, which is like between Malibu and Santa Monica, he said that none of the publications come out there, and he's not that far. He's not in a remote part of the city. He's not in it's in a very rich part of the city, so he's not like he's in a dangerous area. But he said he was so excited that we wanted to interview him because he said nobody comes out here, which surprised me because I felt like the bigger publications would be much more likely to go there than they would go to South Central or Watts. And so he was really grateful that we wanted to tell his story, which is great.
That's good. Plus, I mean, it does give you an excuse to go try all these places that you may or may not have ever.
Yeah, that's. I mean, I like telling people's stories, but one of the best parts is that it forces me to try new, because we're all creatures of habit, and so we all go to the place that's the closest to the house. That's why you keep going back to Taco Norteño, and we've talked about this. I keep telling you to try new places, and you're like, what if I go there and it sucks? Then I wasted a trip to that place, but at least here, very few places where I'll go in and like not want to go back. In fact, I can't think of a place that was like bad. I can think of places that were mediocre, and that not necessarily places that were in the show. But when I was doing the book, there were a few places where I went in and went, "Oh, this place is okay," but I don't feel like it's book worthy, so I'm just not going to add it in. Yeah. But it forces me to go to parts of the city where I wouldn't normally go and go, wow, I didn't know this place was here. Now I'll come back here next time I'm down in this area.
The place I'm moving or want to move, I'm trying to move, is like half the distance between where I am now and the taco place.
So it will take you half the time it takes you now to get there.
It'll take me half the time. I could jog there, eat tacos, and take an Uber back or something. I don't know.
Or jog back. You could
Jog
walk back.
Yeah. I'm like, it's maybe 2 miles, and so that's good. Anyway,
That's a 4 mile run. There you go.
Yeah. There you go. I don't normally run after I've stuffed myself with
that's true.
tacos. So. But so you have another podcast. I want to talk about that a little bit before we go. So
okay,
describe Mitchum.
So Gary Mitchum Reeves was he was actually on the podcast Undisclosed, which was one of my favorite podcasts, and it's the podcast that kind of spawned Taco City in terms of storytelling style. He was wrongfully convicted of murdering his wife and spent 7 years in prison for it before he was partially exonerated. It's very clear from the evidence that he wasn't the one that did it and wasn't even there when it happened, but got blamed for it. But the interesting thing about him, aside from that, is that he used to run moonshine in Georgia in the 60s. And so he has all these great stories. It's like a Dukes of Hazzard episode every week with him, where he's talking about like taking moonshine in the trunk and
that is a good way to describe it,
but still.
But that's a good way to describe it because
it's Mitchum and the General Lee. I feel like there's that narrator. I forget who did it. It was like Waylon Jennings or somebody that used to do the narration when the car would freeze as it jumped over. The boys didn't know if they were going to make it over the cliff.
The same shot
but
every
they
time.
never knew.
It was the same shot.
That was the fun of it. And then it comes down. Yeah, and then the car would come down and drive away, even though it just slammed into the ground after jumping over a pit. So he has these great stories about running moonshine in the 60s and running from the cops and the famous brothels that are there in Rome, Georgia. And he talks about his time in prison and the whole, a lot of the way he got railroaded during his the arrest and the murder itself. And so the podcast is called Mitchum.
Okay, so it's called Mitchum. So why did you start another podcast with him?
Well, it's funny. Undisclosed was tweeting. People were tweeting Undisclosed and telling Mitchum that during his season that they wanted to hear more of his stories. And I said, if you guys make a podcast with Mitchum, I'll score it for free. If you don't have money, like, I don't care. I want to hear him too. And then a few months later, he reached out to me and said, hey, Undisclosed said that they're too busy and they don't have time to make my podcast, but they wanted to ask me if you wanted to do it. And like, what? So we got on the phone and we kind of talked through like what the concept of the podcast would be and how it would frame the episodes. And they basically just kind of handed him over and said, here you go, if you guys work together. And so it's it kind of got thrown into my lap, but it's so different than Taco City that, it's fun to story produce Mitchum while he's telling the stories. He's gotten really good at it. In the beginning, he would tell me this great story, but he'd tell it in like 5 minutes. And like, Mitchum, the episode's got to be longer than this. So we'd have to stretch him out. But now he's great. I barely have to prod him along. And he knows, he knows how to tell a story in a way that is great for a podcast audience. And scoring it is fun, and doing the sound design for it when I can add in gunshots and cars racing and fist fights. It's a very different kind of podcast.
I love the Southern drawl, like it's particularly Georgian Southern drawl. Mm-hmm. So listening to him talk is like, it's I don't know, it hits my sweet spot, personally, because I like the accent and I like but his stories are like, I can't get past the fact that he had all this stuff happen, but he's still just like, it's almost like, well, I got sent to this place and the guy there liked me, so he let me go get cheeseburgers. Like, let me leave prison and go get some cheeseburgers. It's like, what the hell? What prison were you living in? Because I don't know.
Allison and I will talk about that all the time, where she's like, it must have been a 70s thing, but I don't understand how at that time he was technically a convicted murderer, but they let him go to Wendy's to get a cheeseburger and a shake.
It's like, I have friends that, like, you know, like, I don't know, like a suspended license, so they got sent to county jail for 30 days or something like that. You know what I mean? I've talked to people in that situation, and they weren't getting to go cheeseburgers. In fact, they don't even use your name. They're like, inmate 232, stand in line. You know, it's like, this guy is like, maybe it's a Southern thing. Maybe it's just because it's like a small town thing.
Also, I think it has to do with the time period back then too. I mean, I'm sure it's not the same at Floyd County Jail now as it was then.
I wonder how much it has to do with the fact that he was white.
At the time,
in Georgia,
then,
yeah.
Like it's his entire life. You know, he started running moonshine when he was like 12 or 13, so he didn't really have a childhood. So I feel like a lot of his stories have this tragedy of like he never really got to be a kid. He had this small window of being, you know, of playing with your friends or, you know, throwing rocks across ponds, playing, you know, stickball or whatever. And then suddenly he's driving with a fake driver's license and running moonshine for his brother.
Yeah. But the episodes, they're funny, they're fun, they're entertaining, but at the same time, his stories are very touching. Like when he's talking about his dad or his mom, you feel it. He emotes really well in his stories he's telling. And particularly, I meant to message you about this, like, because I just heard the one about his dad. At the end there, it seemed like he wasn't even able to really talk.
Yeah, he got choked up.
You could hear it and you could feel it. That was some good shit. You know, you like feel it. And it's not like the episodes are like deep and heavy, depressing stuff. He's just basically telling entertaining stories of his life. And it's amazing that after, I don't know how many episodes you are in, it just seems like maybe he's never going to run out. And,
I think we're 25 in this week's.
Yeah, and you're just now recently got to his dad. You know, like that's how many episodes, you know, you have, and you're just now talking about his dad. But he's also one of those people that I think he could turn something mundane into an entertaining story. Like his perception of what was happening to him. Well, this would make a great story. And I'm like, what do you mean? The guy just like went out to get the mail and he tripped and picked up some, you know, it's like something like that, and he could turn it into an entertaining story. It's like the Southern yarn, I guess you'd call it, you know.
He it's funny when we did the episode about his dad and he got choked up, and then we finished recording. He said, "Is that okay?" And I was like, "Dude, this is gold. You're gonna have people crying." Well, it's like that with the sister of his sister. That was a 3-part episode, and there's a tragedy that happens with his sister that I won't tell people who haven't listened at the very beginning, and I didn't even know it was coming. So he's like, you know, my sister was born, and then she got married, and then this horrible thing happened, and I was like, whoa, like, what? Like, way to bring it down, like right away.
No, but the stories are good, and I've interacted with him a little bit just from being on Twitter and Facebook and stuff, and he's like the nicest guy.
Yeah, he's super nice. We've stayed with him twice now. We spent 2 or 3 nights over New Year's Eve and through New Year's with him and his wife Linda, and they're just great, and the food's amazing, and yeah, the time just passed so fast that when we left his house, he was like, "Oh, we didn't do this, and we forgot to do this," and I thought, "Oh yeah," I just kept thinking we were going to have more time, and the time went so quickly. Yeah,
it's that southern. It's very southern hospitality. The thing,
right?
Like my grandma. I think what I like so much about it is that it reminds me of like my grandmother, who just passed away in November, but she's from Georgia. She's from like Fitzgerald, Georgia, which is like just a couple of stoplights, you know, really. Mm-hmm. And not really. It's like it's Mayberry. It's a tiny, tiny town. And, you know, but she was very southern, very hospitable, very, you know, sit down, have some tea. I'll make you want something to eat. It was very much like that. Her house was always so comforting to be in. That's what I'm thinking. That's what I'm remembering when I'm listening to Mitchum tell stories. That's what it makes me think of. It's nostalgic for me because of my grandmother. But that's the mood and the vibe that you guys create. And by the way, also he just gets into car chases every now and then. He's got his moonshine. He's got his moonshine tucked in the woods somewhere, and it's just funny. It's just you know what I mean? It's yeah. I shake my head as much listening to that show as any other show. What the hell?
I'm not anymore now because I've talked to him so much, and we've been doing this for I've probably been going back and forth with him for a year now, that I'm not surprised by anything he tells me. In the beginning, I did a lot of head shaking, and now I'm like, of course that happened.
Of course that happened to you, and of course it all worked out fine for you somehow.
We have an episode coming up called Killers where he talks about, and it probably will have aired before this. Maybe not. And he talks about killer couples, like couples that killed each other. Oh, this husband killed this wife. This girlfriend killed this husband. Like, and it's he tells it so matter of fact, but it was just a violent time in the 60s and the early 70s in Rome, and everybody had a gun. It was like the Wild West.
It's like he makes Rome, Georgia sound like the Boardwalk Empire.
Yeah, exactly. And
what I mean?
I've spent time in Rome, Georgia. It's not like that now, at least the Rome that I've seen.
Well,
do you before we go, do you want an exclusive scoop on a podcast that I'm producing? Because I don't think I've talked about it publicly anywhere yet.
Yeah. You're gonna give us a.
Yeah,
I know. I think I know what you're about to say. But
yeah. So a long time ago, I produced a web series for a friend who was an actor. It was more of a found footage shot thing that we shot on iPhone, about a guy who goes back in time to prove that dinosaurs don't exist. And so I realized, or actually my wife brought it to my attention, that in this world of fiction podcasts, and Homecoming in particular, because of how amazing Homecoming's sound design was, that if I turned that show into a podcast, I could do so much more with it than I could budgetarily as a movie or a show. So I'm turning it into a fiction podcast. So it's still in the script stage at this point, but it is called Donovan King, Dinosaur Hunter.
all I remember is in your video version of the show way back, you used the Bat Cave, and that was cool enough for me.
It was very cool to go shoot in the Bat Cave.
Yeah, but like from the 1960s Batman.
Yes, exactly.
That Bat Cave.
With no permit, we just showed up one morning early, and we had to deal with like joggers and a dog that wouldn't leave us alone. It was like two actors and me, and so it was very easy to shoot that. But it didn't have, cinematically and production wise, it didn't look or have the feel that I'd wanted it to look. I feel like with an audio podcast, I can do that. I mean, the time machine, for instance, in the show was, like a crudely built thing with like foil and cardboard and wood. But in the podcast, I can make this thing look like sound like it's a legitimate time machine. Like it's, constructed well. So, I'm excited because, it's been a while. I haven't written fiction or written script since I wrote that show the first time. So it's the first time I've jumped back into it, and into those characters. And it just keeps the universe of Donovan King, Dinosaur Hunter keeps expanding and expanding as I'm writing. Which again, in a podcast form is great. It just means more actors. It doesn't mean, like now I can have stuff take place on a college campus and then we can switch gears to this place. Whereas if we were shooting it, I'd have to find a college campus, let you shoot on it, find out what the permit's going to cost. You'd have to, it's just, I don't want to be a producer in that way in terms of film and TV because, I don't have the tools for that job. And it's money. You got to find somebody to finance you. Whereas with a podcast, I can do all of the posts myself. Yeah, I just need to find amazing actors, and I'm in LA, where some of the most amazing actors in the world are. So,
well, that's going to be out in the spring.
No. Someone just asked me that. Someone asked when I was going to be recording. I'll probably be recording in the summer. Or the late spring, and I'd like to get the entire first season done. There's a 3-season arc. I have a story that's told over 3 seasons, And in my head, it's, 6 episodes per season. So I'd like to get the first season done before it's released. So maybe I'd like it to come out in 2019. Everybody always will say, like coming soon and blah, blah, blah. And then you end up having to push it. My goal is to try and get it out before the end of the year, but we'll see.
Yeah. Well, that would be cool. That's a lot of work. If you just record in the summer just to get everything recorded and then posted.
Post is going to be crazy because I'm already looking into like 3-dimensional style sound where if a dinosaur is chasing them, because obviously it's ridiculous that you go back in time and think the dinosaurs don't exist. We have to have dinosaurs. But if they're being chased by something, I want that sound to come from like the back of your head up through the center and through the front, almost like you're being chased.
Yeah. So, yeah, maybe 2020.
Yeah, maybe 2019.
If Rob wasn't already bald, you might have pulled your hair out by the end of 2019. But,
yes. Yes, because I technically have a 4th podcast that I haven't told anyone about that someone else is editing, and I'm just helping. I'm just recording and. So there's 4 of them, which is crazy. Yeah. Well, you have to come on Film Reverie and talk about the production aspect, like the techno jargon of all the stuff you just described. Yeah, totally.
Because that would be a good Film Reverie.
Schedule something with you and Dobby when he gets back in town.
My hell self. Oh man, I tried to get rid of him too. I've given him clothes. I gave him an old sock. He's supposed to leave, right?
Well, he did, but he keeps coming back.
He keeps coming back. He doesn't understand how it works. Okay, so if people want to find you, it's Rob Gokee pretty much everywhere, right?
Yeah, it's Rob Gokee, ROBGOKEE on Twitter and Instagram. Taco City Pod and Mitchum Pod, both on Twitter and Instagram. And then robgokee.com. You can find everything on my website, too.
Yeah, cool.
There's links to everything there.
And if you want to get a hold of us, of course, we're movieisms@gmail.com. I am Becca Meyer on Instagram and Twitter, and Brad, of course, is Balding Ewok at all of those places as well. Rob, thanks for coming on, man. It was good to talk to you. It's like that by the way, if anyone's listening, that is what our conversations are like. We did not discuss what we were going to talk about, and we covered like 20 topics.
We did, and very few of them were movies.
Right, very few of them are movies. Anyway, good. We'll talk to you, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Yeah, I'll text you right after this. Movieisms is a production of Super Mega Ultra Entertainment and is produced by Michael Beckemeyer and Bradley Kingston. If you'd like to find out more, follow us on Twitter or Instagram. And make sure you click like on our Facebook page, which is facebook.com/movieisms. If you're enjoying this podcast, please take a moment and give us a 5-star review in iTunes. It only takes a minute, and it helps us out more than you can imagine. Thank you very much, and until next time, we'll see you at the movies.